Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and I hope that you had a wonderful Valentine's Day. We are here today on Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, for a work session regarding an update on our American Rescue Plan Act funding and some of the projects that we're funding with that. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shag McNally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. I reside in District 3. Joining me today, is Commissioner John Kafalis, and he resides in District 1, and I think soon will be joining us on the phone will be Commissioner Stevens, who resides in District 2. Also with us today is our County Manager, Lorenda Volker, our Assistant County Manager, Lori Cadrich. We have some other folks in the room that will be introduced as we go forward, and we also have our Budget Director, Josh Fudge, who has been, we have ARPA, we have a couple ARPA people, ARPA lady and ARPA man, who do all these ARPA things for us, and I know that he has lots of information to share with us today. But I thought I'd turn it over to Lorenda to see if she'd like to say anything overall about our presentation today, and welcome everyone. Thanks again.
I am going to say very little and turn it over to Josh. There's a pretty stacked agenda, and we want to make sure we get through in time. So this is some new information and then some updates on where we are.
All right, so on the agenda today, as Lorenda mentioned, we have a couple of projects that we are bringing back from last month. If you remember, we briefly discussed these. Laura Walker, our Director of Human and Economic Health, is seeking approval to basically have these two projects swapped in for a couple of other regional transformation projects that will not go forward. The first is the Medford Family Recovery Project, and the second is the Kechter Affordable Condos Project. And then after that will be the usual update on immediate needs grants and the submission of the 2022 fourth quarter project and expenditure report to the Treasury Department, and then just a financial update and next steps. So with that, I will turn it over to Heather O'Hare from the Human Services Department to discuss the Medford Family Recovery Project.
I think Heather punted after the Super Bowl, punted the ball here, so I'm going to have Thad introduce himself.
Yeah, Thad Paul, Division Manager for Child, Youth, and Family with the Department of Human Services. I apologize to the commissioners. This is the third time in a week that you guys have had to see my face. I know, we're on a roll. So, do a little bit about the Medford project. We got a whole lot of words on the slide, and that was just for your reference, so I don't have to read through all of it. It sounds like there was some conversation prior, so you have a little framework of what the Medford model is, but I'll kind of start it a little bit from the beginning. So the Medford, it has the name Medford only because we found this idea when we visited Medford, Oregon many years ago, that had a full continuum of substance use disorder support and treatment, along with behavioral health support and treatment for families that were at risk or involved in child welfare, and kind of a full continuum to help keep them together. So we've tried a couple different attempts to try to figure out how to start piecing this together, and then over time we've got a little more momentum, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about where that is. So we have a collaboration with community partners, as you can see on the slide there, to work to develop a full continuum of support for families whose substance use and disorders and or housing instability, it kind of put them at risk of coming into child welfare. So to give you a snapshot, for us, when when we get involved with a family and we feel like we have to remove the children because of safety concerns, oftentimes those are substance use disorder are fundamental to that removal reason. In Larimer County, almost 50% of our removals are kids 5 or younger, and 33% of our removals are actually 3 and younger, and about 75 to 80% of those removals are actually because of substance use disorder being kind of a root cause of that. About 75 to 80% of those under the age of 5 removals are because of substance use disorder issues. So it's a pretty substantial concern. So in Medford, they had a model in which child welfare did not have to take custody. They would allow them to go into a different kind of continuum of care, allow the parent and the child to stay together while they kind of had a wraparound of services and support. And obviously for us, kids at that age are some of our most vulnerable, and so we oftentimes need to have a lot of eyes on to help ensure that there's safety and we're mitigating risk in those homes. And oftentimes we're just not able to do that because lack of support networks or other resources to help support the family. So our challenge as our community partners is we started brainstorming where do we start in this, building this continuum, and where do we want to go? And as our discussions continued, we started realizing let's talk about the full continuum, and then we'll figure out where we start based on what options are kind of on the table at the time. So we have a core design team that includes DHS, Summit Stone, both. We have child welfare and the benefits side. Both myself and Vanessa are part of this group. Larimer County Health Department. We have Housing Catalyst, Willow Collective, a couple member from the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, and we're all just brainstorming and coming up with ideas on where we could start and what we could do with this model. We also contracted with APT Associates. And they are coming to the conclusion of doing a full, so APT does a lot of national consultation work in regards to housing and child welfare and kind of all across the spectrum of human services. And so we're coming to near the conclusion of that, but APT is helping us to build a roadmap on how to build this full continuum in our community. And that includes them taking many of the community assessments that have been done over in the different departments across the county, kind of culminating that, doing some good analysis of our data, of our child welfare data, but also overlaying that within the context of our community data. And we'll be on site in a few weeks to do some co-design sessions with various partners, as well as some lived expertise folks from the community. So that kind of provides where we are. I'll talk a little bit about the continuum and then just open up for questions. The full continuum, our ideal full continuum would include, as you'll see there, site-based housing with on-site services and supports. So when we say that, so Medford, for example, they had a full continuum that included residential care, where the mom, in their model, the mom and the baby would stay together in residential. They also had a, lack of a better term, a sober living or supported living environment with that same model, but they were in a house setting, not in a treatment facility. And then they had a step down for sustainable housing through vouchers and other programs. And then they had the normal access to substance use disorder and other services across the community, which is what we already have currently. So our ideal model would model all of those components. We have gone over and toured wings. So in Weld County, North Range Behavioral Health actually runs a residential facility that they call wings, which actually allows the moms and the children to stay together instead of having to do removal. So we already have a model that is in our region, and their capacity is somewhat limited, but they're more than willing to partner with us, knowing that there's a lot happening in our community when it comes to residential services. And so that would be one component. The next piece is that site-based sober living environment that would have everything kind of wrapped around. Including staff 24/7 on site in the housing facility to help support them. We would have substance use disorder treatment provider on site, behavioral health services on site, as well as kind of a targeted early childhood mental health services, and more of a dyadic model, so the parent and child services together, something that Willow Collective specializes in. And then we would use more of our scattered site using our vouchers that we have access to in child welfare, whether it's family unification program vouchers or other vouchers that our Housing Catalyst or other housing partners would have as a step-down model. And so as we talked through, we started targeting that ideal is creating that site-based location is where we want to go, but that is a pretty long runway to stand up. It's much more costly. And so right now we're working on the idea of just doing some scattered site supports while we continue to build out this continuum. So the support that ARPA would help provide was really provide emphasis onto the site-based model. There was some conversations about where that could be. Housing Catalyst has been a great partner for this, and is more than interested and willing to start having conversations and start exploring options. Obviously, the Longview campus model is out there. There might be options out there. There's pros and cons, right? There would be potentially parents and adults that would be in the Longview treatment facility that could step down into this location and reunify with their children sooner. A downfall might be just the location and lack in transportation. So those would be other things that we'd want to target. It's a relatively quick high level, so I want to give you time for questions, thoughts.
So Thad, can you talk about what other funding you're seeking
So we are preparing to go after some of the state funding that is available through I can't remember the title of the grant of the state funding right now, but through the Behavioral Health Association at the state. Some of that is, it's the same pot of money, quote unquote, that the county's also applied for phase 2 of the model, but ours is a separate pot that is for the child, youth, and family. So that is one, and I'm seeing more and more grants coming across, opportunities coming across my desk that fits within the context of this. Housing Authority is also looking at all grant opportunities to explore housing type of grants to help support the development of this.
So I will say that Laura's not here to speak for herself, but the reason she put this forward is because she sees the synergy between the Longview campus, potentially the youth center, and this facility really being complementary to each other. And so she really does recommend this going forward for that reason. This does not detract from. There are transportation problems to be resolved. We don't think those are insurmountable, but we also don't know if we'll receive the grant. And so this would be an opportunity to apply and potentially create more of a campus atmosphere out at Longview.
Commissioner Foss, do you have questions, comments, sir? Go ahead.
Thank you, Thad. Mm-hmm. What exactly would the county ARPA funds be used for?
To help create the infrastructure for a site-based housing location.
So that's still a little bit amorphous. Help create the infrastructure for a site-based, are you talking about a building different from the Longview campus?
Yes, it would not, the idea being is that it could be on that same campus, but it would be separate from Longview. This would be like some of the site-based locations that Housing Catalyst has now. So it's a housing location that has apartments and family units and kitchens and everybody, it's that kind of an environment.
So is it a child welfare version of perhaps permanent supportive housing type of model where, although in this case it seems like the housing would be of a more of a, not a permanent nature?
I wouldn't go so far to say child welfare. I think in our conversations, the goal would be is that we would have a full continuum of this in our community
So
support.
people at risk of being interfacing.
So in an ideal world, families can have access to this wraparound location without having to come to child welfare. That would be the ideal future state, and also an avenue for us to be able to access it for families that are already coming into our system, and we can keep them together.
And case management would be included.
Case management, on-site behavioral health, or, wraparound substance use and behavioral health treatment.
A couple more. I'm still trying to. So the one aspect of the continuum of care would be to actually gather the resources to build a place where parents and their children that are dealing with substance use disorders, et cetera, could live with support and everything else. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And one possible location for that could be co-located out where the behavioral health facility is at Longview?
Correct.
Okay, so far I'm doing good.
You're on it.
And you reference moms and their kids. How would this work with a two-parent household?
So Medford had a kind of a continuum. They had apartment units that had the capacity for one parent, one child. They had one, so you would have a variety of housing units that would allow the capacity for two parents, single parents, multiple children, one children. So it would be designing a model that would allow for that full continuum. I think if I was to think big picture and really grandiose, there will be a whole population at Longview that are not parents that will also could benefit from a housing support wraparound step-down program from Longview. So as they exit Longview, they still need that additional support. So in theory, you could have family units and individual units on the same location that would provide that transition of care for both families and non-families.
Thank you. We're getting closer. I appreciate your patience with my questions. So the step down, so it seems like if a family is identified that could benefit from these services, if they're not homeless, they're living in a place. So how would that work where the recommendation is that they move into some type of residential facility? Am I missing something there?
So the residential facility is kind of one of those things that would be a nice to have in our community, not a have to have. So this is these are housing units, and many of our families that are facing substance use disorder that is disrupting their family also have housing insecurity. So they may not be, they're bouncing from couch to couch, home to home, friend to friend. So they may not be the true definition of homeless on living in the street, but they are housing insecure.
That's an important distinction. Housing insecurity,
Plus
if they're going from couch to couch, then they're defined as homeless. So I guess I'm trying to understand if they're at risk of being homeless because they're having difficulty paying rent or this or that, then we would want to support them, I think, to stay in their homes.
Sure.
And still provide these services. How would that work?
Yeah, so the service continuum is a full service continuum. There's a population that of child welfare, or there's such risk from the substance use of the parents that we need more wraparound support and eyes on to ensure safety of the child. So that would be the sober living housing environment. And then there would be folks that are already living either through vouchers or other living arrangements that have services that they're either already going to, either enhanced outpatient or outpatient services that are already offered. And so somebody does not have, families would move along the continuum based on their need. We wouldn't say you have to go to this just to get the array of services. It's based on the needs of the family.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop there, Madam Chair. Perhaps you or Commissioner Stevens have questions or comments.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, did you have some comments or questions?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the questions I have is how many units are we contemplating? And I apologize if that already.
I think I caught that whole bit kind of cut off in the end there. So how many units we haven't discussed? We haven't. This was. We're waiting for the app consultants to help us build this roadmap to have a better sense on what the volume and what the right model is. We believe in child welfare, we easily would have 10 units filled constantly from families that are just involved in child welfare to keeping home. But if we really do this from a prevention lens, we're going to need more than 10 units to help provide that full continuum for our community. The goal being that, my goal would be is that we get as far upstream as possible so we never have that trauma event that leads them into child welfare. And we could easily fill 10 units on any given day based on the families that we have involved with us. We have about,
Thank you.
You're welcome. We have about 35 kids under the age of 3 that are in our custody, and that is somewhere in the range of probably 15 to 16 families. So like I said, the majority of those are substance use disorder and housing insecurity are wrapped up into the risk factors of those families.
Commissioner Stevens.
That's helpful. I'm hearing a lot of echo, so I don't know if that's normal. But so can we spend these dollars fast enough? So my concern is that we have some timelines to spend some of these ARPA dollars, and while I love this concept, I really do. Can we spend the money quickly enough to be able to, go be within the guidelines of the ARPA dollars? And is it better to kind of move to a scattered site idea and then maybe contemplate the actual building housing on site later?
Commissioner, this is Josh Fudge. These funds would be those that have been applied for through the lost revenue provision. And so as far as the Treasury Department is concerned, the county's already spent them. So there really aren't any time frame on these funds in that regard.
Well, that's good. And then I guess my last question is, how much are we asking for here? Is this $1 million? Is this a couple $1 million? Is this, is it up to our discretion? And what amount would make a difference in this? And it looks like Housing Catalyst is a partner, so how would we Are they willing to kind of help us get CAFA, help and other kinds of dollars to be able to make this happen?
So this request would be for $2 million to be allocated from the county's FRF allocation, and I'll let Thad maybe talk about the other sources.
Yeah, so Housing Catalyst is more than willing, to, and I think that's what who I heard is more than willing to be a partner, and to put this in their backlog of opportunities to go after. Like I said, we both Housing Catalyst and myself have seen how easy 10 grants come across our desks in the last 6 months, all of which would easily fit within the context of this project. So I feel confident that there's lots of opportunity to piece together the right model. We would need Housing Catalyst support to help build the infrastructure for the housing model, because that's their area of expertise, obviously. So I think there's lots of opportunity just because of the amount of grant opportunities that we're seeing, both state and federal, to help make this whole. To your point, Commissioner Stevens, I think our smaller committee is working on is targeting right now how to build our scattered site model based on where we are and what we have available to our services array already. We feel like that through the use of some of our housing FUP vouchers that Child Welfare has access to, support from Housing Catalyst and support from some of Stone and Willow Collective, that we actually could do a scattered site without a significant investment, so that this investment would be more for creating a true housing environment, not so additional housing compared to what we already have access to.
Well, thank you. I think this is a great idea. I just love the idea of keeping families together, and this is important work that you do already, but this kind of infrastructure to be able to support that would be great. So I'm definitely supportive of looking at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. So let me just start off with, I support the concept and the idea of keeping families together. And I know, with my work on LICOG and stuff, how important that is and what better outcomes there are. I echo kind of my Commissioner Kafalis' questions is like, what does it mean by infrastructure? And I'm working on this behavioral health initiative from the beginning. I don't know if we ever talked about having an apartment complex on the site. So this is a really big difference for what this kind of was intended. And trust me, I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just trying to, because this is kind of a shift, right? Just kind of with some other projects. And I know that we've talked about having a writing array out there for like more of a hearts and horses model, and there was other things that are there. So I kind of have questions and concerns. We have a 40-acre campus there. I know there was a lot of infrastructure we put in for getting the sewer and the lift, I don't know, was the lift pump and all those things. And I know it was built for a certain capacity. So there's a lot of questions I have for that, because when you add a housing unit, that adds a lot of strain on the system. And I'm just curious, because if we add a adolescent building that might have some adolescent care, and now we're going to add a housing unit, it seems like that's a departure from what the original master plan was. So I have, again, I support the concept and idea, but I have concerns about, we only have so much space on that site. So what are we giving up? What's changing? What's not going to happen? And we know we had a lot of residents who were concerned about housing out there, or a homeless shelter, which is it's not a homeless shelter, let me just say that, but there was concerns. And we had said to the public, no, it's going to be this or that, right? And so I want to kind of go back and make sure what we have informed, what we have kind of told the neighbors and stuff, make sure that we haven't said one thing and then we're doing another, and maybe we aren't. I just want to go make sure that we're kind of going back with that. And I know, I do know the writing arena and some of those other things were brought up. And so there was a lot of things that were maybe not promised, but were kind of share with the public what was going to be out there, and I understand the need for this type of housing, and I just want, again, I will say for a third time, I support this concept. But I think I have just some concerns. I need to know more about this and want to make sure, what are we not doing then? Because I know the adolescent was going to be 8 acres. This current one that's opening up is, Lori, help me out, is it like 5 acres, the current one, or how big that is with the parking lots? I don't know. So that's, getting close to half. So what does that look like? And if, how many units? Do you say 10, or is it, I'm just curious, I'm trying to envision this. And again, I'm not trying to be against, I just don't want to, because I don't see behavioral health here, and so I don't have that opportunity to say, okay, what's not going there now, and what are we changing? So I see Heather's come up and help me kind of understand.
She'll bail me out. A couple thoughts. So our initial conversations was not that it had to be located at that campus. So let's back up. It was through my conversation with Laura that she said, hey, maybe that would be a great continuum of care for that campus, but I don't know that this has to be there based on the infrastructure and the needs of that campus. What we need is we need a housing structure, right? So no matter what we do, we need to invest in the housing structure, whether it's there or some other community location, and we can use our partners in the housing and development area to help go after other opportunities if it's not at this location. There's pros and cons no matter where it lands. If it's here, then then you have the transition, and because there's a lot of service array that's already existing out there, would make close access and be able to kind of maximize the staff that would be on site, that there would be more folks on that location, and it's also farther out and all those other opportunities.
Good afternoon, Heather O'Hare, Human Services Director. What I would add to what Thad just shared, so there's really 2 potential populations, right? The population that Thad highlighted with families with very young children that are coming to our doors because the parent needs substance use treatment, and our only option right now, unfortunately, is to find another place for that child to reside while the parent gets their treatment and addresses housing instability. And so there is the opportunity that with a model like this, we could keep that family together from the very beginning. And then there is the other population that Thad highlighted, where we have families that are involved in our system now that with something like this in our community could be reunited sooner than they are today, in that step-down approach of going into a supportive housing model similar to permanent supportive housing, but with a family approach that has the wraparound treatment, and then can also, over time, help us pivot how we're using existing housing vouchers today with our housing partners, because there is a dedicated pot of housing vouchers for the reunification of families. But finding the housing options that will take that family to use that voucher and then wrapping around the therapeutic supports is a gap today. So the request for the ARPA funds is to continue to work with our housing partners, identify where there is housing stock that we could implement this model in the scattered site, but it is going to need capital investment to be able to position that housing stock for this model so that a family can reside there with the clinical supports and the treatment services on site with the case management. So the capital investment, but I would also say there is tremendous opportunity for us to continue our work with APT. They are national leaders and are really helping us develop the model, but also think about the business plan to sustain it financially into the future. So continuing to expand our work with APT and potentially then also identifying a grant writer. So Thad and I have a lot of conversations. There are a lot of grants in this space that are coming, but the resources to actually write the grant and go after those funds to then help us kickstart the program and sustain it long term, it's really all 3 of those pieces together.
Okay, that's really helpful. That helps, because I was kind of like, oh, we're going down this path. I have more questions there. But what you just did, of course, I think the scattered model and all that, absolutely 100,000, 10%. I think there are a lot of housing stock out there, even commercially, that we could retrofit. A lot of it commercial is sitting open that's near hospitals or things that we can do this. So that, my first comment, it sounds a lot I'm not against it at that site, it's just that it's kind of switching gears there, and I think that's a bigger conversation we have to have, right? Because the second thing is interesting you brought up the grant writer, because that was a big takeaway from the NACO is they're like, you just got to get a grant writer. There's so much opportunities right now. And so I was going to bring that up with our assistant county manager and county manager that I know a lot of departments have grant writers, but we need maybe more, another one. I know to help kind of track some of these opportunities down and have that expertise, to target that writing for this opportunities. And I know one other county actually just hired a grant writer, and it's in a very hard to find housing place, and they're actually bought a house for this grant writer, and she's already brought in enough. It's already been a great investment, right? They've already turned over, paid for her already with grants that she's gotten, and she hasn't even been there 6 months. So I feel like that's obviously something that I support, thinking that's really important. There's and so then on top of that, this sounds like also the opioid abatement funding opportunities, and there is that statewide pocket of money for infrastructure that we haven't had a chance as a regional opioid abatement council even to talk about. We keep talking about human infrastructure because we feel like we need someone else to help us write grants and track this all down. And I was going to suggest that, and that was the other thing I got back from the NACO conference. I just came back last night from DC. And it was really exhausting, but really exhilarating at the same time. And they had brought up that having grant writers or looking at some of these grant opportunities was another thing to look at in the space. But there is the infrastructure money that is in there that I don't think a lot of people are ready to apply for that because they haven't really figured what they're doing money. So that's something I think we should go back and look at, because if there's that opportunity because I don't know if any of their counties talking about this right now, and if there's that opportunity for us to go for some of that grant money through that, and I think it's COIAC is with the Attorney General's office. Let's see if we can connect and see if that's open still, and if we can go for that, because I think that would be another opportunity to bring some resources, because this I think also fits that need, is kind of that infrastructure for this, especially with families, and I think it would probably be a strong application. So I haven't heard anybody else talking about it in the regional opioid abatement meetings that I've been at, but it was something brought out at the national panel. So I'd like to help kind of see if we can connect that and see if that's another opportunity, if not this round, the next round, because there's going to be this ongoing money and grants to kind of go for the next, 15 years at least. So it's ongoing funding, so it's something to think about too. So I think that sounds better to me. I want to make sure, because you start talking about the behavioral health campus, and I was like, whoa, because that's not something we talked about with that master plan. I just want to make sure where this was going, and I'm glad my colleague asked the $2 million, what is this infrastructure money for? But it sounds like what you just described, Heather, is something a little different and something that's more immediate that we could implement immediately, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I see Lorinda wants to add to that.
I guess I just want to say what you're really requesting in this process is the matching piece of the grant, right? The project you have well-defined. This would be money if you get the state funds to match, or is this for operations?
So we have utilized some of our existing human services funds to start the consulting project with APT and the community partners. And so I think when you stepped out, I was explaining that there is opportunity to expand that even further and continue working with them to develop the business model and the sustainability of the funding. And so right now it's really stuck in that without additional funds to expand the work, and then also identify, like Thad said, where on the continuum do we want to start? Do we need to start based on what the community needs are showing? So it's that next step then in being able to move anything forward with a whole lot of structure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a couple of other quick points. One consideration regarding the discussions around the behavioral health facility as a potential location. I think it's important to keep in mind that folks who have expressed concerns about the 24/7 homeless shelter up on North College, that they have suggested, we build it close to the behavioral, on the property where the behavioral health facility at Longview is. So I bring that up as a consideration because if it were ever to go in that direction, you need to frame this thing properly because, I've been telling folks that, no, it won't work to put the 24/7 homeless shelter on, adjacent or co-located with the behavioral health. So that's one point I wanted to make. And the second point, and I think it's been already stated, that as you look at, it sounds like the site-based housing, a location, and then there's the scattered site housing. But with the site-based housing, important to consider locations, but also inventory where that could be renovated or repurposed buildings that already might be, in existence. So those are the only 2 points other than I support the project.
The only piece, sorry, Lorinda, that I would add that we haven't touched on is the overlap with the strategic plan and in particular the child care objective. So the impact to the children, the site-based approach, the continuum also needs to take into account the needs of those children, not only the ones that become involved in our system. Despite our best work, we know that it traumatizes kids and it traumatizes their family. And so if there's a way to also then wrap around trauma-informed services for those children, wrap around the early learning and development that we know happens in childcare services, being able to also then set the next generation up for success despite whatever challenges their parents might be going through. So it is really a dual approach that overlaps quite a bit with the work that the strategic plan has tackled in the last couple of years.
And finally, on my part, and thanks for the good discussion, when you mentioned about trauma-informed care, I believe I shared this with you earlier, that when I was out at the Mason Place yesterday, finally going on a tour, they informed me about trauma-informed design. So I would hope with the apt associates that would be something that they would look at if we were to find a location and either build something or renovate something, that this idea of, trauma-informed design, which I think is important.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know that when I took that tour too, they had brought that up, but it sounds like that's a model going forward for them with all their next projects, as I understand. So Commissioner Stevens, did you have anything else you'd like to add or questions?
No, I'm good. Like I said, I'm supportive of this, and I think it's a great way to supplement the work that we're already doing. Keeps families together, so it seems like it's very much under our mission statement and aligns with our strategic plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lorinda, you wanted to add something.
I guess I'd like to say this is a little different from other projects we've had sort of pitched for this area because it is directly related to the behavioral health services. It's a step-down facility potentially, and it does tie into the county's own mission. And it feels like with the wraparound care, case management, it is very much a behavioral health focus and not just housing focus, and so I'll just stress that as well.
One more thing, if I may. This caused me to think, and it's listed up there with stakeholders. How do we so parents who are in community corrections, how are we dealing with that if they with their children? Are they separated? How does that work?
Yeah, they're separated. We actually have several different case examples that are informing what our future looks like based on families that are separated, that are coming out of actually community corrections and ready to go back into the community setting. And so those are perfect examples of a referral source that would be available to a housing, to reunification opportunity. So again, it's both to keep families together, but also to help speed up the reunification process.
So the children are either in foster care or kinship care?
Mm-hmm.
Kinship care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't know that I have it captured on it because we do have a community corrections as part of our core team as well as the sheriff's office, so we have both sides.
Yeah, I think it's up there. So, okay. So this is $2 million to help with the infrastructure and keep the work about associates, which I think I've gotten some emails on that going forward. So that's what this is. So I just want to make sure that, because we've kind of gotten through a lot through this conversation, we'll go back to what the ask was for the public that are listening in.
So APT is coming to the LCIOG meeting in person in March. So you'll get a chance to meet them and get an even more detailed overview of the work. So I noticed that that is already on your calendar, but wanted to let you know that that's what the agenda is for.
That's part of their stakeholder conversation. So that whole week, they're meeting with various stakeholders, which includes lived experience folks from our community, to help inform a co-design model to help build out this full continuum, if you will.
Okay, I haven't heard anyone against moving forward with this. Thank you for helping clarify, because I want to make sure what path we're going down, because I had, like I said, I had some concerns. So I guess that's a direction then for us to kind of let them.
What it sounds like we're hearing is that it's okay to substitute this for one of the other projects on the projects list and continue to work this issue. All this means is that we're holding this aside. We're not spending this money yet, but we're saying that there's consensus among the board to continue to explore this as an idea, and that if other funding is found and we move forward, this would be available for that project.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from you all? Got what you needed?
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Thanks for being here today. And I guess I didn't get the memo that it was Green Day. Okay, Josh, hope we didn't take too long on that, but,
Oh, no, we're good.
okay.
So the next project is the Kechter Affordable Condos Project, and the request for this one is $1 million. And I'll turn it over to Aaliyah Rodriguez.
And Laura got the memo, and so did Rhonda, so I'm feeling really kind of like I missed the memo. All right, go ahead. Thanks. Welcome, Aaliyah. Sorry, just like I was wearing green today. Thanks.
I apologize. There we go. Okay. So these are the answers to the questions that I heard from the work session.
Sorry, Aaliyah, can you introduce yourself? I don't know if Josh really didn't register. Say thank you.
Malia Rodriguez. I'm the Housing Stability Program Manager.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here to talk about Kechter Affordable. It's townhomes projects. I apologize for not correcting that. I just filled it in. They're not condos, they're townhomes, which was one of the questions last month, so I can speak to that later. This is a project that is already underway and under construction. It is, where did I have? Thank you. Okay, it is 54 townhomes in South Fort Collins that are permanently affordable. The $1 million from the county would help fill the $2.6 million gap that this development is experiencing due to increased costs with construction. The homes themselves will be sold to families at 70% AMI. It was asked what that looks like. So a family of four, it's $75,000 annually. Would be a 70% AMI family, and their total housing payment would be less than that $2,065. That's a 33% of their income. The homes themselves would be sold by the Community Land Trust. So this is a partnership with City of Fort Collins, Housing Catalyst, and the Elevations Community Land Trust. City of Fort Collins donated the land. This land started in their land bank, and they wanted an affordable housing project to come to the community, so that's what they asked for. And then in partnership with Housing Catalyst, they found Elevations Community Land Trust and found a developer to build affordable homeownership opportunities. A community land trust is a mission-aligned they're aligned with permanent affordable housing. They're a nonprofit. And that's important to keep in mind as you talk about the land lease, because that was talked about last month as well. The homeowners do pay a fee for the land. It's $100 a month. It cannot be increased more than 2% every 3 years. So it's not something that the Community Land Trust can just increase on a whim. It's regulated. And that $100 a month, what it does is it pays for the property taxes of the land. It also pays for services to the homeowners. The Community Land Trust provides financial counseling, provides other services to the homeowners themselves. It also works as a beginning indicator. So if a homeowner falls behind on that payment, the Community Land Trust can reach out to them, see if there's an issue, and help them avoid foreclosure. Foreclosure rates in this type of community are very low for that reason, because they're able to catch it early on and help the homeowner. It's pretty straightforward, like I said, because it's already under construction. I can pause here and see if there's any questions.
I'm just going to ask real quick, because I think I understand Commissioner Cavalos, this is $1 million or $2 million, $1 million?
$1 million.
To help with the construction costs, and the increase in construction costs, right? And then I had a quick question, if my colleagues started to jump in first, but, you know, I was having this conversation at the conference. When we talk about, 70% AMI and we look at that housing payment, really, what is that percentage of their monthly income? Because, they say your housing shouldn't be more than, 30% or something. And so what does that make it, right at 30% or?
33.
33, so it's still a little over kind of what was recommended and.
Most mortgage loans are going to go up to 33%.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just, I know.
I'd also just like to point out that includes their whole housing payment. It includes the mortgage on the townhome. It also includes the monthly fee that they pay to the Community Land Trust for the land. It also will include if they have an HOA fee that they pay. So the total housing payment will be under 33%.
Does it include the homeowner's insurance?
Yes, because that'll be in the PITI payment. So the taxes and insurance will be part of the mortgage payment. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I have a few questions.
Commissioner Cavalos.
Thank you. Thank you, Alia Rodriguez. You said there were 59 townhomes? Say it again?
54.
And thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually under construction?
Mm-hmm.
And when do they expect to complete the construction?
Completion is scheduled, it just says 2023, so it'll be completed this year, is
Okay.
what I have in my notes.
And I'm curious, the outreach, they're targeting folks, so it's at 70% of AMI, or I guess to afford that monthly payment, it's families that are at 70, or is there a range there? How does that work?
No, it's really families at 70% AMI. It'd be really difficult for them to go any lower because they can't make a payment to match that. That'll be 30% of someone lower than 70%.
So at least they're at least at 70% AMI?
Yes.
Or there's a range, 70 to 80, or how does that work?
Yeah, they can go 70 to 80.
Okay.
But their goal is to have all the homeowners at 70 so that they're serving that low income.
And in terms of, it seems like this would be meet the needs of essential workers who are, whether it's teachers or firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
How will they do the outreach? How will they target the folks who might be able to make an offer or purchase the townhomes?
Sure. They've actually already started outreach. Elevation's Community Land Trust have. They hold meetings, nightly meetings, and they provide dinner, and they talk about how you can apply for these homes when they come available, and they've also offered them in Spanish as well. So they've already started that outreach piece to let future homeowners know that it's going to be an opportunity coming available.
Just a couple more real quick. Thanks for the dialogue. So the marketing, as far as you understand, is meant to be, is targeted and inclusive, so that all families might have this opportunity?
Yes, sir.
And are any of the, are the units being built with universal design in mind, or any of the units available for people with disabilities?
I can't speak to that, but I can get back to you and reach out to Elevations.
I'd be curious about that. And otherwise, I think you've answered my questions, and I I would be supportive of investing in this project to help address the $2.6 million financing gap.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions or comments?
I have one question. So we are being asked for $1 million, and it looks like the gap is $2.6 million. So how will the remaining portion of the gap be filled? Is that a barrier to completing this project?
No, the project is going to be completed, but the City of Fort Collins and the partners are working to fill that gap as well. The partnership that's been formed has already applied for funds through City of Fort Collins because all they've contributed so far is the land itself. So they've applied for funds at City of Fort Collins. They're also meeting with banks to try and get the interest rates lower to cut the costs as well. So there's a lot of work being done on their end to fill that gap in other ways as well.
Oh, great, thanks. I just wanted to ask that because we don't want to put up $1 million and then the project doesn't move ahead. So
Right.
I'm supportive. You know, this is very much a gap in our community. It helps people create wealth and learn how to be good homeowners. And I like the financial literacy piece. So I would be supportive of using the monies.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Yeah, I support this. I like, I guess I'm echoing my colleagues' comments. I like the financial literacy piece and helping build generational wealth. And I appreciate you addressing the land fee, because I did have concerns about that, because I know we have that with mobile home parks, and I don't, I hate to see that someone has this extra fee. It could increase and really make it unaffordable if it's not maintained. And so it's great to know what the money's going for. It's just to, it's going in to pay for the property taxes, so that helps. And this, it's just curious if this, do you know if this development is near schools or near mass transit or, mobility things? I'm just curious if that was also kind of taken into account, so.
I actually happen to live in the neighborhood next door, so it is basically across the street from Zach Elementary and near Fossil Ridge High School. There is a bus line maybe a mile to the north on Rock Creek and Lady Moon Drive, so it's walking distance. If you're in shape, it's relatively close. So.
Great. That's also near some wonderful open spaces and parks for families, so that's great to know. Yeah, I appreciate that, because I feel like this potentially could be, a really big community builder, and hopefully it's in a, welcoming space, so that's great. Thank you for that, Josh. Okay, I'm supportive of this. And you, do you have other comments, Commissioner Cafalis?
No, I think we're all in agreement. I just would like to follow up on whether any of the townhomes will be built to accommodate people with disabilities, or whether they're considering universal design when they're building these things.
I will definitely follow up.
Thanks.
Thank you, Leah. Commissioner Stevens, anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Thad, and thank you, Aaliyah. Do you have any other things you'd like to wrap up? But thank you for getting more information on that.
Yeah.
And Josh, thanks for the additional information. That warms my heart to hear that. So, okay, I guess we're moving on.
So next on the agenda is just a brief overview of the immediate needs grants and where we're at with those. There's been about $2.7 million distributed to the grantees as of Monday. There's only about $389,000 remaining to be dispersed. 41 of the 52 projects are now fully reimbursed. They basically were already done or expired at the end of 2022. 5 projects expire here at the end of the first quarter, 2 expire at the end of June, and then there are 4 projects that expire at the end of this year. So we are close to wrapping up that program.
Commissioner Cafalis.
Thank you. a reminder, Josh, what is the evaluation component? I mean, how are we evaluating the success of these projects?
So we will, once these kind of wrap up, we will go back and ask for reports on what activities were done. Many of the grants to the small businesses were basically just trying to help offset the lost revenue that they faced, and that was the case with some nonprofits as well. So, you know, we kind of already have that because we saw their revenues decline precipitously in 2020 and 2021. But we are requesting additional information, especially from those that went to provide services. So we'll be bringing those back kind of throughout the year.
Thank you, Commissioner Kapos. Commissioner Stevens, do you have questions or comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. So when we're all done with all of this, is there a way to get, I mean, we've been working at this and talking about this for a while now, just kind of get a spreadsheet and just remind us of all the the projects and what's completed, and kind of maybe even who got, what kind of month they got done, and kind of just to overall kind of look at the progress and how they built out, and as we're telling our story, as that was another message from the NACO conference, is making sure we're telling our story of how we use these funds, because we need to remind ourselves and remind public that this is, thankfully, this is from the current administration and the congressional folks who helped, give us opportunity and appropriated these funds, and we got these funds, and also sharing with our federal partners what we've been doing and telling our stories and reminding them of how, grateful, and this is what we've done, and this is how the impact has. And so it'd just be nice to have that information to share with them, along with sharing, and I know we have that on the website. I was sharing that with the president of NACO, and she was really glad to hear of our stories, and she's going to take a look at that. But I just wanted to maybe have an update on some of those immediate need grants. It'd be great to remind myself of that. And I hear we're maybe having a tour of maybe that's not the immediate needs one, but the economic workforce innovation grants. We're going to be looking at one of those. So I'm looking forward to maybe even getting to see some of these just for my own curiosity. So.
Yeah, we can certainly provide a table at one of the future meetings here of where the funds went, and then continue to update that website and gather those stories throughout the year. So we'll put another effort into that during this year.
Thank you, Josh.
The fourth quarter project and expenditure report was submitted to the Treasury Department on January 27th. We reported to the Treasury Department that we spent $37.6 million for the fourth quarter, and that is because we reported our use of the $36.5 million in lost revenue calculated from 2020 and 2021. Those costs were applied to general fund payroll and operating costs per the guidance related to that, and so those funds have been deposited into our disaster fund and are now essentially free for the county to use for whatever purpose and for however long we wish. There was about $561,000 reported for payroll at Community Justice Alternatives, of which about $311,000 was recyclable, so that was their general fund share of payroll that can now be reused for these projects. The remaining $250,000 was remitted to the Community Corrections Fund to offset their ongoing deficit. And then the remainder of the expenses you see there was about $412,000 for immediate needs grants, $54,000 for sheriff inmate medical care for symptom monitoring and checks and things of that nature, $41,000 for the district attorney prosecutor position, $15,000 for administrative costs, and $9,000 for vicarious trauma. And so of those, the CJ payroll is now completed. We won't be submitting reimbursement for that any longer, and the administrative costs are completed as well. So any questions on that?
Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
I don't see any other. Thank you, Josh.
So this pie chart just shows the grand total of expenses that have been reported to Treasury through basically the end of last year. We've reported to Treasury that we've spent $51.5 million of our $69.3 million allocation, and so those are complete. As you can see, the largest chunk of that by far is that lost revenue provision from 2020 and 2021. There's about $7.8 million of recyclable payroll, and then smaller items such as supplemental and retention pay, immediate needs, inmate medical, other payroll costs, and all other. Next, barring any questions, so this just shows the sources of funding. This basically adds up both the SL, FRF, which are the $69.3 million, the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund, which is $1.3 million, $6.8 million of the SLFRF are recyclable funds. Interest is about $1.1 million, and that was what was recognized through the end of last year. I just looked before I came in here, and the interest that accrued to this fund for January was $244,000. Still the largest monthly amount that we've had thus far, and so next time you see this chart, that yellow slice will be $1.3 million. And then lost revenue, we now project total to be about $54.3 million. That's the 36.5 that was calculated for 2020 and 2021. The remainder presumably will be calculated for 2022. Any questions on that slide?
Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Thanks, Josh.
Sure. So of the $71.7 million, what is available and has not yet been allocated is that green slice at about $6.3 million. About $11.4 million has been spent, and about $53.9 million has been allocated but not yet spent. Any questions? Okay. As far as what's been spent year to date, the immediate needs grants as of Monday was about $2.7 million. Public safety payroll and community justice alternatives was about just under $2 million. Supplemental pay was about $1.8 million. Broadband projects continue to ramp up, and funds are going out the door for that. That's now at about $1.3 million. Community justice alternatives, revenue deficit, Park Lane mobile home, those have been on there for a while at about $2 million. We do have some funds that have gone out the door for regional projects, especially for the food bank and for, I believe, the Poudre Park Community Hall, and so that is now $700,000. Jail inmate medical care has totaled about $354,000, and then all others are about $225,000 for a total of about $11.4 million. Any questions? And then these next few charts just show what's been spent and what's been allocated and available among our different buckets. The FRF direct allocation, about $8.2 million. We are nearly complete with that. Pretty much all of the remaining costs are those, actually about half the remaining that's been allocated but not spent is the immediate needs grants at about $400,000. I believe on what I emailed you, this chart didn't look exactly right because the bottom started at like $7 million, so this shows that of the FRF direct allocation, we've pretty much spent all of that at about $7.4 million. With the recyclable funds of about $6.8 million, we've allocated but not spent about $300,000. That on the legend, the spent chart should be red. That's $2 million. That's the Park Lane Mobile Home Project and the CJA revenue deficit. There are about $4.5 million of recyclable funds that have not yet been allocated. With lost revenue, about $50.4 million of that has been allocated but not yet spent. One change from prior months is that the Behavioral Health Phase 2 project, which has $10 million allocated to it. Previously, that was shown in the FRF direct reimbursement bucket. However, because the calculations for lost revenue more than cover the cost of that. That's now allocated over to lost revenues, so that's a change from prior years.
That's significant because it takes away the time limit.
Yes.
Which is good for us as we move forward.
Yes, indeed. So there's about $1.9 million of lost revenue funds that have not yet been allocated. Fund interest, when I put this together, was about $1.05 million. This will continue to get bigger as we continue on, especially until we start writing larger checks for some of those regional projects. I anticipate that this could be at least $1.5 to $2 million, perhaps hopefully by the summer. A reminder, we are allocating this to the Fleet Campus project, and so as this bar grows, the amount that's not allocated in lost revenue will also grow. We'll kind of shift the allocation for that project from lost revenue over to interest to help pay for that. So that's good news. It frees up additional dollars for future uses of these funds. Finally, the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund is $1.3 million, and that has also been allocated to the Fleet Campus project. And that is the end of the financial update. Any questions on those?
Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, I just want to say thank you to Josh and everyone involved. I think there's a lot to be proud of here, and we have a great story to tell. So I think going forward, we need to think about ways to tell this story. I think that that's really important as we sort of get to some of the end of these funds. So I know we've done it through our website, and I know we've done it through some articles in the paper, but I really would like us to find a big way to celebrate this. And really get the word out to the community that we've helped so many people. So I guess I just want us to think about how to do that. And then finally, I know during our retreat we talked about road and bridge funding, and that those opportunities to put something in road and bridge might have to be decided upon fairly quickly, and I don't know if we can have an update about that.
Sure. So basically, the lost revenue funds could be applied to road and bridge, either capital projects or operating and maintenance if you so chose. The timing behind that is that when we tell the Treasury Department what costs we are going to apply the lost revenue funds to, we would need to make clear that we are applying those funds to road and bridge payroll and operating costs. And that way they are effectively then federal revenues that aren't for any specific purpose that then makes them available to use for road and bridge projects. If we were to tell the Treasury Department we're applying these to general fund costs, then by state law we could not apply them to the road and bridge fund because you can't transfer general fund to road and bridge unless it's for disasters. So there is time, certainly probably during the first half of this year, to determine if that's one way you want to allocate these funds to road and bridge, then we can certainly make that happen. But it's a decision that would have to be made probably in the next few months.
Thank you, Josh. Commissioner?
Okay. Thank you, that's good, and we'll just probably try to think about that in the next few months.
Commissioner Kofalis?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and like Commissioner Stevens, I want to express gratitude to our budget director and all the folks that were involved, certainly Laura Walker and others, regarding how I think we've been as thoughtful as any entity can be, government entity, as far as how to invest these funds to actually make a difference in people's lives. So I wanted to express that. And also, I agree with what I appreciate that Commissioner Stevens brought up about the road and bridge discussion that we ought to have in the next couple of months. So I'm grateful to be reminded of that. And finally, I certainly agree that we need to find some creative ways to tell our story about how we've been thoughtful and how we've tried to engage the community, and how we believe that this is, we can show through stories and perhaps data how this has made a difference, to improve quality of life, which is related to our core mission as a county government. And, one suggestion I would offer there is, I think it should be much more than that, but perhaps when the time is right, we could, we each do those monthly columns, perhaps, for 3 months, we could divide it up somehow, and, somebody focus in one area, maybe the next month, another commissioner focus on another area to tell some of that story. That might be part of how we want to get the word out.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, the columns are a good idea. We just have to remind ourselves that some of the newspapers are now not publishing those. So I don't know why. So, but I think that is always something. We have been talking a little bit about it. And I echo, we've been talking about a little bit in the columns already the last couple of years, just kind of sharing what we've been talking about. And I want to thank, Josh, for these monthly updates. I think it's great that we're talking. And again, thank you to Laura Walker and everyone, and Lorenda and Lori as we've navigated this. And again, another takeaway from the national conferences, we have done a lot with this money, and we have made an impact. And I think we've been talking about telling our story for a while now, and we got the website and things, and you always hear me say, if we're not telling our story, someone else is telling it for us, and I much rather tell our story the way we want to tell our story. So I had an idea as I was talking, because I did hear from, as we met with Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett yesterday in D.C., and then having some other conversations, is maybe we do have kind of open house kind of showcase and bring in some of the partners that this has been, either Park Lane or other folks, and invite Congressman DeGoose and Congresswoman Carveo and Congressman Buck and the senators. And if not, they can't come, invite them, maybe their staff will come. And we can thank them for, this opportunity and show how this has impacted the community and how we have done this collaboratively, regional-wise, and with partnerships. And maybe Bohemian, I'm just thinking out loud, and we can have a little celebration, but maybe just a recognition of all of our partners and thanking them and letting them see the scope and depth and breadth of this. And maybe we, just have an opportunity to hear the stories firsthand and have, I know it's a lot of work, but it also might be great for staff for us just to pause and reflect back on where we've come. And when I shared with some of the other, I was talking to the tribal nations representatives and some folks from Georgia and Chicago, and I was trying to get out of my Colorado bubble, which I love the Colorado bubble at the conference, but I was trying to make sure I met at least a dozen new commissioners, and I did, from all across the country, and hearing what they shared and what they did with their money, and they were quite, I didn't meet anybody who had done this kind of regional approach with groups. Maybe with the broadband a little bit, but still it was very focused, and it was a lot of private partners, not maybe government and nonprofits. So I think it might be something to explore, just so people, next year as we kind of really wrap up some big pieces and we're moving on to phase 2 and stuff, it would be a great opportunity for folks to see how kind of it works for them. And I think that might be kind of exciting to share. So just an idea, especially for our federal partners, since they allocated this money to us, for them to get a really good grasp of all the things we've done. So what are your thoughts on that, Lorenda?
So I think your timing is perfect. We should know in the next few months how these state grants are coming through for these transformational projects. That's a great chance to really congratulate our partners and the regional approach that's been taken. We are only the lead on one of these projects. The other projects are being led by other folks, and that is a real testament to the regional approach this community has taken. I think it also gives us a chance to invite some of those smaller grants we did for immediate needs to talk about what happened and how this changed their lives, their business, made them able to stay open post-pandemic. And I think there are things we've done outside of that, like Park Lane and other projects. So I think the timing is right. Maybe sometime this summer we'll have the partners identified, projects identified, and it would be a great chance to really draw attention and celebrate. Have balloons and streamers, whatever we want, to make the most of this moment, because it'll be a while till some of these things get built. It takes time once you get the funding to do the project. So we'll have a series of ribbon cuttings to attend after that. But certainly a recognition of the regional approaches and the partnerships is really important.
Thank you, Linda. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I wasn't sure of the timing, but this summer sounds great. We have a lot going on this year, and I think it's great just to keep this in front of the public too, because we're showing them that I feel we're really being good stewards of the public funding and trust, and I want to make sure they understand, the kind of work that we're doing and being good stewards of that money. So I look forward to helping support that. So any other things you'd like to share other than just what amazing Josh does keeping us informed of how this money is all getting spent and allocated and progressing?
So, Josh, you've done an amazing job. You and Laura have just juggled all of this beautifully. I think you've got a preview for what we'll talk about in March. That's your last slide, and then I think we are done.
Thank you, first of all. I appreciate it, and it's been interesting and fun work. And like you said, and it will be great to see all the good things that have been done with it. So I appreciate that. Our next monthly work session on this topic will be on March 20th. And thus far on the agenda, we have Mark Pfaffinger from Information Technology will be discussing broadband financing and specifically the arrangements for getting back some share of the monthly rates that are paid by the customers. And then also the Office of the District Attorney will be presenting on the work done by the prosecutor position that we funded with these funds as well. And that is the conclusion of the presentation.
So if I might take a moment of personal privilege just to share with the public, I'm not sure I shared this with my colleague, Commissioner Gonzalez, and I know I shared it with, I'm looking for the slide, but Larimer County, with the new resources that came out with NACO at the conference, there was they were talking about the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars and county examples of exemplars. And I'm not sure if Lorenda shared this, but we were highlighted as a county, county examples. There was one from New York, Dutchess County, Gaston County, North Carolina, Oakland County, Michigan, and Larimer County. And they show the map, and and this is what it was said. I don't know if you heard this yet, Josh, but Larimer County has reached agreements with partners across the region to invest a portion of its recovery funds towards the 4 broadband expansion projects toward 4 broadband expansion projects to improve internet community in unserved and underserved areas. The county has thus far partnered with school districts, community organizations, and municipal broadband partners in the effort and intend to seek additional partnerships and grant opportunities to continue the work. So I just thought that was, we were highlighted along with our comprehensive plan from 2019 and the fire mitigation work and resiliency work that we're doing that also was highlighted in the wildfire toolbook. So I didn't see too many other counties mentioned twice in the literature at NACO, so I have a lot of pride with that. Even I wasn't commissioner in 2019, Commissioner Kofalos was, and I was one of those residents that kept going to the comprehensive plan meetings, so it's just great to see our staff and the work being recognized nationally. So just wanted to share that. I didn't know if you had heard that, Josh, but we were highlighted in the ARPA section of the NACO stuff. So with that, it's 2:49 and we are adjourned. Thank you for joining us.